Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 68 of the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. I'm James Parisi here with my co-host Aiden Sarah, and I am ready to talk some puck. I've had a pretty relaxed week on the hockey front, but admittedly only watching one whole game and bits and pieces of another one or two of them. But I'm ready to get back into it. I'm ready to dive back in. I don't know if I felt hockey overwhelmed, but I was just taking time for some other stuff. Being typical pretentious Vancouverite, going to a great many coffee shops and breweries and fancy Yaletown pubs to talk about things I can't afford. But enough of that. My co-host, Aiden, how are we doing over in Red Deer, Alberta?
Dude, I want to just no, you know what? I completely take back where I was going with that because I was gonna say like I want to have a conversation with somebody who can seriously make a valid argument to me why it's better for a city to be less walkable. Because that's
Mm.
like my biggest envy of you right now, I think, is the feasibility of walking to do things that I just don't have. And the reason I take that back is generally people against walkable cities
Mm.
correlate with the lowest IQ voting demographic. So I don't want to have that conversation, in fact,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's a terrible tangent that we are not going to take ourselves deep into.
yeah, so but what I will say is I'm so jealous that you can like walk somewhere that isn't the same like 20 meters that I just have either towards forest area or into a school. That's the two. And otherwise it's kind of sad.
That is quite unfortunate. Is there like somewhere you can drive to short, like briefly, that looks nice and is enjoyable to walk through at least?
Yeah, it's not too bad. The hurdle becomes the weather very quickly, right? Like
Yeah.
and and that's where we're at. I think tonight actually there's supposed to be some snow. So Tuesday morning I'm gonna be back in the covered in cold and white Alberta.
Okay, I have to ask you because it sounds like the most dorky, lame thing to me, and like maybe I'm just wrong and uneducated and inexperienced on the matter, but would you ever rock some snowshoes and go for like an alpine walk? Because to me, that sounds like the worst hobby of all time.
Yeah, I had buddies in high school who went one time, and I think they came back with positive things to say. But the only time you need them is if you're yeah, it's like you said, like if you're way off a trail and it's in a spot that I'd be somewhat nervous to be in to begin with. So I think that would kind of be the main driver away from it for me is just that like the end of the day, like if I can't get back to another human being or a chance that I might find another human being within like 20 minutes of walking, I'm a little bit uneasy.
Yeah, that's quite reasonable. I mean, like you don't necessarily have to go solo, but I also don't think it would be that easy to find someone to go snowshoeing with you.
That's fair too, yeah.
Like
Well,
if
and
you
at
ask
the end,
me, I love you, man, but I'm saying no.
well, and the other thing too is, and this pertains to you for sure with where you live, but like if you're gonna take a whole day to go up a mountain and do something in the snow, why would you pick snowshoeing before you pick anything else, right? Like that's more what my question to an avid snowshoer would be is like, have you tried skiing? Because that seems like it's fun, right? Like snowboarding is seems like it would be fun. It's a much more just a much more I guess a much more a flexible activity because you can travel at a high rate of speed or you can choose not to, right? Versus snowshoeing is just seems like difficult walking with annoying shoes, and that's the start
Aiden,
and
let's
end
not
of it.
sugarcoat it. It seems like a joke.
I love skiing, man. I had a bad concussion skiing like 3 or 4 years ago now, so I've kind of been weary, but man, it's a ton of fun. Like, so I understand the impulse to want to be out on the mountain. It's just there's more fun ways to do that, I think.
Well, Aiden, I've been skiing once, and my friend and his girlfriend decided they were going to teach me, and I had myself a nice solo send out on the town in Whistler Village the night before. I got 45 minutes of inebriated sleep on a leather two-seater love seat couch before hitting the slopes, and I was immediately like, oh yeah, let's go learn on that bunny hill thing everyone always talks about that you're supposed to learn on. My friend's girlfriend at the time immediately goes, no, no, no. Let's just go to Whistler Peak. We'll
We call
ride,
those
yeah, we'll ride all the way up and then you can just ski down. That's the best way to learn. Aiden, it wasn't the best way to learn.
no, we call those bad friends, I think.
Yeah, I mean maybe that's part of the reason that this friend's girlfriend is now a friend's ex-girlfriend. So that's cool.
Do you think that contributed to it? Is that what you're saying?
I wish it did. Honestly, I know it didn't, but I wish it did.
What a start to this podcast.
Yeah.
Hockey right now.
Before we go hockey, I just want to elaborate on my being a pretentious Vancouverite. My Saturday activity was meeting my friend Colton, I guess our mutual friend now that you're in the hockey pool, downtown at Waterfront Station, going to coffee shops like DeVille and Nemesis, where you can get an $8 hazelnut latte that you know what tasted heavenly.
Hey,
Um,
listen,
and then hold on, we walked through vintage clothing stores and record shops before taking a SkyTrain yet again because you can just get anywhere in this city in minutes. And we sat in Dovetail and El Guapo. I saw one of our former classmates at El Guapo, a current awesome newsie. Shout out Bianca Rego, who's really killing it in the news industry right now as a producer for a CKNW show, I believe. Stopped and had a great margarita. I ate some tacos. And then we popped in a Dovetail. I don't know if you know about Dovetail, but one of the probably coolest, hottest new places in the city. It's quite expensive, and I would say it's like the premier establishment in Yale Town right now. But very cool, very good time. I only had one beer there because I can't afford most of the things on the menu there, but was quite cool.
that seems like such a solid normal day. And I think the pretentiousness in that was just the way you pronounced the coffee shop names. Like, I think if you just
It's
say
called
we
DeVille.
I know, but if you just say we got coffee and then walked around, like I can't tell you how many hours I've spent and like embarrassingly large sums of money on records, right? Like, so there's a lot of that I would totally jive with. But you just lost me when you like pronounced these coffee places like you were
When I
making
put
love
that
to
voice
them.
on, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that
Okay,
that
where I get pretentious is when I'm like, no, we are not allowed to go to a Cactus Club or an Earl's or the Keg or any of those things. We are going to this random hole in the wall awesome place that I know from mutual random Vancouver foodie people.
Well, at the end of the day, dude, you're in Vancouver as somebody like surrounded by a lot of uh very prototypical chain restaurants and not a whole lot more. Um Enjoy the culture that's there. That's my final like
Yeah.
message.
All right. Well, enough of this. You guys don't want to hear that much about my life, even though I would yap about anything forever. Let's talk some hockey, and where better to start with the NHL's hottest team, the Winnipeg Jets. This team is balanced, it is loaded, and at times you look at the lineup and go, who is that? Why is he good? But it's the kind of team that is set up to dominate regular season games. And I say regular season games because we haven't seen this team do anything in the playoffs in years. But they look damn good right now. The former best third line in the NHL is now kind of a second line. They've it's now Mason Appleton, Adam Lowry, and Nino Niederreiter They are damn good. They suppress shots, they get scoring chances, and they let guys like Cole Perfetti, Nikolai Ehlers, and Vladislav Nemesnikov feast on matchups against other teams' fourth lines and third lines. And damn, are they fun to watch. Gabe Velarde's heating back up. Josh Morrissey's unstoppable. The Buck, Connor Hellebuck, looks very good. Aiden, what else can you say about this team?
Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers are both having very, very good seasons so far. And we've seen this with Ehlers before, man, but every time it just ends in some sucky injury somehow. So I just hope that we see 82 games out of Ehlers this year. That's one of my hopes for this Jets team as much as anything. But you said it yourself. This is the kind of team that is built to win these regular season games that they're winning. And they're doing it kind of in every different way. They're doing it with contributions up and down the lineup. They beat Tampa Bay 7-4. It wasn't Connor Hellebuck's best game for sure, but Winnipeg, like that's just another example of how uh, game in, game out, week in, week out, they've risen to every occasion and they've managed to produce everything they've needed to produce to be 11-1-0 to this point in the
Oh,
season. Um, like Josh Morrissey, I think during that game against Tampa Bay, just moved into second place in points among defensemen. He
yep.
passed his teammate Neil Pionk in the process. So Cale Makar is doing some crazy things, but save for this superhuman in Colorado, like you have the two most productive offensive defensemen in the league in this team too, right? And you mentioned Niederreiter. We haven't talked about the fact that he's got 10 points in 12 games, right? Like it's not just the fact that the Lowry Niederreiter Appleton line is playing so well in those matchups. They're also putting points up on the board. Lowry's got 9 and 12. Niederreiter's got 10 and 12. Appleton's got 9 and 12. And then you said it yourself. Vladislav Nemesnikov and Cole Perfetti are skating circles around whoever they're on the ice with. Like it's a very, very, very well coached team by Scott Arniel right now. He deserves a tremendous amount of credit for it. Um, my hope genuinely, as it always is for Winnipeg, is that the success doesn't falter. But we look around that Central Division, James, we look at somebody like the Colorado Avalanche, who we are going to talk about in a little bit here, and Colorado, whose injury problems are starting to at least show signs of taking the injuries are taking their foot off the throats of the Avalanche a little bit because Arturi Lekin and Valeri Nichushkin are both expected back soon. Um, Winnipeg hasn't had anybody, right? We haven't seen anything out of Winnipeg aside from the annual Ville Hainola injury that shows that they're not at 100%, right? So for the Jets, the measure of this team and the real test is going to be okay. What happens when Ehlers misses a week and a half, or what happens when Connor's out for a couple games, or what happens even if like an Adam Lowry gets knocked up, misses a week, right? Like that's going to be to me the test of these Jets because so far they've played some hard fought games, but as far as adversity goes, they haven't seen too much of it through 12. So again, I hope nothing but the best. My worry for them is it's going to be one of these guys goes down and then the whole system just starts to sputter. So I hope that doesn't happen, but that's what I'm watching out for in Winnipeg right now.
There's an injury. I want to see Brad Lambert get called up.
Yeah, he looked like he was going to make it out of camp. And this is, again, same conversation with him as we just had about Callum Ritchie. I'd much rather see him first line center in Manitoba than 6.5 minutes a night on the fourth line, right? In
Totally.
Winnipeg. Yeah.
Totally. Moving on. I know we weren't supposed to go Colorado next, but it feels fitting given being the same division. There's a lot of good news as we've talked about. Valeri Nichushkin is expected back on November 10th. He's been skating with the team a little bit. He is eligible for reinstatement at that time, so I'm not exactly sure what the process looks like, but he could be back then, but I would say within the week after that for sure. And we're recording on Monday, November 4th. You will be listening at the earliest on Tuesday, November 5th. That is the day Arturi Lekkinen is back in the lineup. And man, is that guy ever a Swiss Army knife needed in that lineup. It is very, very, I don't want to say one dimensional, but definitely missing an element when him or Logan O'Connor or both are out of the lineup. So with him back, I think it's a much more multi-dimensional attack, and I very, very much look forward to seeing it. If you are playing fantasy hockey and you see Arturi Lehkonen on the waiver wire, you jump at that. You go have fun with it, given if it's a league with a lot of depth. Also, Valeri Nichushkin, what does he always do in fantasy? Put up absolute numbers, whether it's shots, hits, game-winning goals, power play points. That is exactly the kind of guy you want in a banger league, or basically any league that's more than goals and assists. I don't have a timeline on Drouin returning, but and I also don't really have one on Landeskog. But I mean, anything coming back is so helpful. Anything moving into this lineup and maybe pushing some of these guys who are usually supposed to be in the AHL out of the lineup. Like, I'll give all respect to them. They're trying. They're going out and giving it their best, but it's a lot of guys who maybe don't know the system and aren't really up to the caliber of players that they're playing against. Aiden, what can you say about what Valeri Nichushkin will bring to this lineup?
I think the I have conversations with other friends that are hockey fans sometimes, and if we ever have conversations about like why specific rules should be the way they should be, it's usually all down to, at the end of the day, if there's something in hockey you don't like, sometimes you don't need to punish it anytime. It just needs to be a deterrence. And Valeri Nichushkin's presence on the ice every time he's out there, like the other team, especially the other defenses, because if a back checking defenseman going back to get the puck turns his back on Valeri Nichushkin forechecking, Nichushkin's going to make his life hell, right? Like the aggressiveness on the forecheck of this guy, he is so good at just popping up into a scenario and suffocating the opponent, whether that be in the offensive zone, just bearing down on the net, or on, like I said, he's an excellent forechecker. So Colorado, again, it opens up all of this skill they have when the opposition is so worried about Nichushkin. And literally, like I think Nichushkin's presence often with Mikko Rantanen, with Cale Makar especially, it's basically like a deterrence that allows the others the space. And again, you're an Avs fan, you can agree or disagree with me on that. But that's kind of the when I watch Nichushkin and the Avs at their best, it's almost like the fear that he's going to do what he can to you is enough for the defenseman maybe to be passive enough to let Cale Makar go and do crazy things.
To me, he's like the epitome of the modern day version of a power forward.
Yeah, well, and we hear that a bit, right? Like we've heard that with Brady Tkachuk a bunch, and I think I think yeah, I think that's that's what made Ryan Leonard a top 10 pick.
Right.
I don't think Ryan Leonard's skill was among the 10 best players in that draft, but I would have had him in the top 10 too because he is built like an impact player the way Valeri Nichushkin is, right? And every team wants that. So for Colorado, hopefully again, fingers crossed that Nichushkin's back and he's back to stay. That's the other thing.
Aiden, I think it's time we turn this conversation and take a look at some veterans around the league doing some very cool things. And what veterans, other than maybe some of the greatest players of all time? Not maybe, they are. We'll start first with Alex Ovechkin. He has been hot even since we talked about him scoring a couple goals on the last pod. Ovi's now up to 860, and by the numbers, which, paces for season are never really that accurate early on, but he's on pace to beat Gretzky's record this year. And it's not just the numbers he's putting up. Anyone who's watched a Caps game recently tells me he is back checking and putting more effort in than any of the past few seasons. This guy is driven, determined to not only break the record, but win some more games for this Caps team. What can you tell me about what you've seen?
He's noticeably not as fast as he has been in years past, but this year he doesn't seem as far behind the play as I think he did last year. That's kind of the number one thing. The goal he scored the other day was classic Ovechkin, right? It was just the one timer on the power play, but he's getting chances at 5-on-5 because he's putting himself in the right spots, right? He's getting to those right spots. And again, I think there was a clip that was kind of going around of him laying it all out on the back check at one point, and at the end of the day, you're on a Washington Capitals team here that's definitely in transition. You've got guys like Connor McMichael who have come out of the gates flying this season, kind of ready to take the torch that's being passed to them. Well, if I'm Connor McMichael, if I'm Alexi Protas, if I'm any of these young Washington Capitals forwards, that to me, my 39-year-old captain who is basically here to break a goal record right now, um, is doing that on the back check. To me, that's that's somebody I want to go into battle with. That's what somebody I want to go into battle for. His effort in the last week or two that I've watched Capitals games has impressed the hell out of me. Like every time I look, it's again, he's slow and you can see that he's slow, but the foot's never off the gas, and that's commendable.
Definitely, I like that you mentioned Protas. He is a behemoth of a man, and they have him playing a lot of minutes lately in comparison to last season. If they can find a way to develop him into a top six forward as this team transitions into the future, that is a nice benefit to have. I mean, imagine having a speedy winger playing with Ryan Leonard and him. That could be a very dangerous second line. But keeping this veterans theme going, let's shift it over to Pittsburgh, a team that has struggled a little bit, as expected, but there have been some good games here and there. And a lot of the time, well, actually, the I would say all the time when they're having success, it is because of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, who I believe for the first time ever, for more than a game, are playing on the same line. I'm not talking, oh, a shift here and there or the power play. They're playing on the same line at even strength. Aiden, I never really thought this would happen. I always
Hey,
wanted to see it. I've always talked about how cool it would be, but damn, is it cool.
listen, like I kind of made a comment about Crosby on the podcast. I think it was last week where I said something to the effect of when his legs go and he can't play center anymore, he's going to tuck 40 on the wing. Well, at the end of the day, that was a that was a comment about the guy's skill and hockey IQ, and it can definitely be applied to Evgeny Malkin as well because Malkin had such a strong start to the season offensively, and it actually seemed like a very smart move to take some of his defensive responsibilities away because he was showing how capable he was offensively. And at the end of the day, I do think that on this Pittsburgh Penguins team, if you look down the lineup, you got Lars Eller, you got Nola Chari, Blake Lizotte, Cody Glass, all of Kevin Hayes, all of these forwards that can play a defensive role. You've got all these players capable of playing center in a defensive role. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to throw him on Crosby's wing because it's not like you have now holes down the lineup that you're needing to fill. Malkin's defensive responsibilities are easily fulfilled by these depth guys they have, and now you got him on the wing, and it's just go play offense, go score goals, and he's obliging them.
And Aiden, one of the things I love about this is when a coach who has been responsible for players for a long time, like Mike Sullivan, he's been the coach of this team for a lot of years now. We're looking at almost a decade now, I believe. It's close.
It is
Um,
close. He won both cups with them, 16-17 for sure.
yeah, so like we're getting to a decade coaching these players, coaching this team, and this is the first time he's gone with that. And while to some it may seem like an easy choice to give that a go, I love watching a longtime coach change it up. To have the cojones to give that a go, I love it. Because I mean, I've always been of the mind that spread out and balance your attack. That has always been my thought. Loading up one line for more than a few shifts or a period when you're behind, I've never really been in favor of that. But man, is it ever cool. So I hope these guys continue to play for much of the season. And I mean, Sullivan's a pretty smart guy. When they need to be split up, he's going to split them up. I mean, one thing I've always thought would be hilarious that I don't think we'll ever see, but I always thought it would be hilarious is if a coach just decides, all right, Eric Carlson, you're a winger now.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be funny. I agree that it's unlikely at best, but it would be an interesting strategy to see deployed.
I
Um,
want to see it once before he retires.
we're talking Ovechkin, Crosby, and Malkin. Big shout out as well, just because I he just scored in this game for LA against Nashville. Anze Kopitar has still shown very few signs of slowing down. Like he's not his 92 point self anymore, but he's consistently been this guy and continues to be so far this season on this Kings team. So again, he's the same age as Crosby, a year younger than Malkin and Ovechkin. Big kudos to Kopitar and him continuing to be at the top level because I don't think he's getting enough credit for that right now.
Well, in continuing, that is exactly the word because the last 3 seasons, 70 points, 74 points, and 67 points. And all of those 3 seasons, at least 81 games played. There were a few seasons before that where it's a few less games, but if you think about it, those were just shortened seasons. This guy does not miss games often, and with his style of play, the durability is not something to shake a stick at. Like, that is ridiculously impressive, especially when you consider his size, like 6'3", 225, and he plays a very physical game, right? So, I mean, keep it going, Kopi. 37 years old. Will be 38 going into next season. And like you said, no signs of slowing down for the best Slovenian player in hockey history. Moving on, where do you want to take this next?
Well,
I
again, we're talking about guys in their late 30s right now and saying, "Oh, look at them. They're doing a really good job," even though some people are maybe writing them off. You want to talk about guys being written off? 32-year-old Mark Stone, man. Like uh,
ugh,
I understand this guy's injury history, obviously, right? Like there was no guarantee that he was gonna be able to continue to play at the top level with the severity and the amount of problems he had with his back even alone. Um, he's the best winger in the league right now. If you watch Vegas game in, game out, he
what
right
about
now,
Kaprizov?
if you yeah, that I was gonna say Stone and Kaprizov, along with Makara, probably my Hart finalists. If you end the season right now, I've been all over all three of those guys. Um, but Stone, man, like at his best in Ottawa and at the especially in the beginning of Vegas, he was like a Selke caliber winger to me. He was so
Which
good
is rare.
defensively. It is, yeah, and I gave a lot of respect. Like at the end of the day, I'm very frustrated with the way Mitch Marner's playing, but I've always loved how he plays in his own zone, and his Selke nomination was super deserved. And I could even see Stone this year with the way this guy's playing. We could be talking about a Selke nomination for another winger here because again, we talk about Ovechkin's motor always going. Stone's motor has not stopped once this season. And he's moving like he's 25. Like he doesn't look like he's 32. He doesn't look like he's been through 1.5 million surgeries. Like, my God, this guy is dominating games for Vegas. It's fun to watch
Best
if you're a
part
fan
about
of
it
Mark
too.
Stone.
Yeah, like 100% best part about it too. We all saw last week Mark Stone injured, undisclosed. And then immediately news comes out, oh, he's back Saturday. So as soon as the news dropped that he was injured, everyone went LTIR, LTIR. They're gonna stash him all year. No, 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 no. The dude wants to play. If he can play, he's going to play. And back right away, extends his point streak, another assist. I mean, rocking those gold buckets, so cool, so damn cool. But we talked Mark Stone last week. I'm not going to make this an extended conversation again. Let's shift gears to some younger guys. Macklin Celebrini is back Tuesday. Back to a Sharks team that has shown a little bit more signs of life, I would say. Will Smith potted a couple goals. It is two, right? He scored twice.
Will Smith, yeah, he had two in the first. Same thing with Michkov. Two in the game he got his first in.
Yeah, that's right. And from what I saw on just a little YouTube highlight package, he actually looked really good.
Yeah,
And
he's growing into this role with his team. It was not a lot of positivity on the first maybe half dozen games, but he's getting his feet underneath him.
yeah, I mean the one game I watched earlier this season, I thought, is he going to need to play in the AHL for a while? But no, I think like he's getting the experience he needs, and like you said, he's growing into it. In the end, he's a young kid. Like he is, I mean, barely an adult. So let's give him some breathing room, and it's cool to see him pot a couple. But this begs the question, and I don't know if other people have been asking this, but why in the hell does he wear number two? Why is that on his jersey? Two is a forward. I can get over five, six. I can get over 4 even. But if you're wearing 2 or 3 as a forward, what is going on? How did you arrive at that point?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer.
I I don't know. Like, wh who okayed this? Is that what he wore in college and for the States?
Uh, yes, I have definitely seen him wearing number two. Like if he had shown up in the league, I would have been a lot more shook, but I feel like I knew this coming in. Like because I'm usually with you where it's like, why are you wearing that number? You're not supposed to do that.
According to an article from the Mercury News, after a quick Google search, why does he like number 2, which is usually worn by a defenseman? He says he grew up a Boston College fan, where long before he was born, Brian Leach starred for them and wore number 2.
Look at that.
Apparently, he's a big hockey nerd, and apparently nothing to do with hockey whatsoever, but he showed Macklin Celebrini the American Pie movies. I respect that a lot considering he's what, 19?
Smith, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So a 19-year-old knowing those movies and watching them, I love it because I kind of was worried that those early 2000s raunchy comedies were a bygone era and kids weren't watching those anymore. Like I had to show them to my 16-year-old brother. He had never even heard of them. So, I mean, kudos to him playing better and being a fan of cool stuff. Aiden, where are we heading next?
Macklin Celebrini's back tomorrow. You were talking about Will Smith and the Sharks, so that's going to be very, very interesting. Again, I want to see him continue what he did in that first game. You talked about Will Smith. The other one that I know you wanted to talk about, I don't think we've given enough credit to how good Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg had played this season after they went on the
Yeah.
offer sheets. Both players took their game to another level in St. Louis. And again, James and I reference this a lot without like specific examples. So it's worth mentioning when we do get a specific example of sometimes it is truly just like a new destination, new fit can spark something in a player. And it looks like looks a little bit like both of these guys have that so far this year in St. Louis. But unfortunately for the Blues and unfortunately for Philip Broberg with how good he's playing, because James, if he kept it up, he would have been a dark horse for the Four Nations face-off for Sweden, but he's out
Oh
with an
yeah.
injury. Out with an injury. So what do you think of Broberg? What do you think of Holloway? And how much are they going to miss him? Because he's been on their top pair, like minutes wise, all
Yeah,
season so far.
I've liked Holloway, but I don't know with the room for opportunity being offered to him, it kind of seemed like a shoe in. This one I expected. Broberg, everyone talked about how he was probably Edmonton's best defenseman at times during the Stanley Cup final. Like there were shifts where he is carrying the play and he's the reason they're not getting scored on. He's the reason that they're able to transition to offense so quickly. He pretty much showed why he was drafted that early and why he was that highly touted of a prospect. Everyone I've talked to that has watched him play so far this season, blown away by what he has to offer. And then some scouts, some people in the hockey media world have come out and said, well, I've been saying this all along. You know what? I wasn't hearing that for a long time.
Yeah.
I was not. I'm sorry, I'm not calling people liars, but maybe you were saying it behind closed doors. I wasn't hearing anyone hype up Philip Broberg for a long time.
No, listen, Philip Broberg from day one, boomer bust, right? So
Right.
with boomer bust prospects, you're always going to have the people that when they boom, they're like, "Oh, I knew they were going to boom." And when they bust, "Oh, I knew they were going to bust." Because at the end of the day, that's the nature of a boomer bust prospect. You really just have to pick a side.
Yeah.
So realistically here, like at the end of the day, what we saw to Broberg in the playoffs last year, it was signs that okay, this toolkit that it was so obvious he can use it at this level and he can succeed using it at this level, right? And that was kind of the that might have been the biggest thing for me in terms of believing in this guy after or believing in this guy when the St. Louis Blues took the swing they did to give him that much money.
Definitely. And I will say that speaking of the money, totally worth the contract already. Like he is that much of a role player on that team that He's needed, whether they're good, whether they're bad. It will hinge on how he plays. I mean, Torrey Krug is out the whole season, to my knowledge, and he is going to have all the runway he wants to be a top pair defenseman for this team. But speaking of this team, and Broberg, I believe, out 6 to 8 weeks or 4 to 6. I don't
I,
quite recall.
I think it was 4 to 6, him and Barzell both. So let's go to Barzell next.
Hold on, hold on. I'm not done talking Blues yet because I said that I have only watched one full game this past week, which is kind of messed up considering we have a hockey podcast and I'm a co-host of it. Um, when I was at El Guapo in Yaletown, I watched St. Louis versus Toronto on Saturday, and a couple key takeaways. I think myself and everyone else forgot that Colton Parayko is a menace in front of the net, and he has a bomb of a shot. Nobody talks about him anymore because his game took a massive step back after the Blues Cup run. And I mean, it was the kind of thing where they wouldn't have won the cup without him playing that way, but he just wasn't that guy after. But man, watching that game, I went, oh, maybe he still is good. Maybe it was just a random one off game. But I was super impressed. Another person I was impressed by, someone Aiden's not a big fan of, Jordan Binnington. Binner. So sick. So good. And this had my buddy Colton and I talking. I don't think I am choosing anyone over him for Canada's goalie right now at all.
Well,
I think
I
he's number one choice.
promise I promised last time that I'd bring best on best rosters, and that promise is going to be 50% fulfilled because I got a Canada and a USA one done. He's my starter for Canada. It really, the way I see these Canadian goaltenders, it's the starter and the backup is going to be Aiden Hill and Jordan Binnington, depending on who's hotter. And the 3-4 will be one of Montembeault or Stuart Skinner, literally again, depending on who's hotter. Stuart Skinner played a game in Columbus last week where it looked like he was just an ECHL goalie there for a call up because everybody in the organization was hurt. But then he completely outdueled Dan Vladar in a weirdly like goaltending heavy battle of Alberta yesterday. Like so again with Skinner with Montembeault, who we've seen be all over the place again this season as well. Like I don't see either of those guys taking the number one. To me, it's Hill and Binnington, and yeah, it's Binnington right now. He had a great game on Saturday. Um, I probably have more faith in Hill long term, but I think that's your 1-2 regardless. Like if it's gonna kind of if it's gonna change who the starter is, that's gonna depend on form. But I think they've got their spots there.
I mean, the one thing that will make me go Binner above every other option available is that when the guy is played in big games that matter, he's always been nothing short of excellent.
That's massive. That's massive, dude. I did a whole video for the YouTube channel last week, basically about how like these tournaments are won not by the most talented team, but it's by the team that can show up when it matters, right? And again, well, just go watch St. Louis Boston 2019 Game 7 Stanley Cup Final. Go watch what this guy did, right? Like we're not too far removed from him being a beast in the playoffs, not just in that series, right? Like he's done this intermittently. So as much as, I definitely think the guy, the guy's kind of got to go down the Brad Marchand route of, hey, you got to like learn to be an adult and grow up and not, I mean, in Marchand's case, it was lick people. In Binnington's case, it was try and trip them as they're skating into the end wall at 100 miles an hour. But regardless, like those shortcomings aside, the play has been there to support his selection on Team Canada.
Last note on the Blues before we move on. Shout out almost 40-year-old Ryan Suter for playing 26 and a half minutes in that win over the Maple Leafs. Clocking 2 assists, I believe. And speaking of clock, it looked like he turned it back. Probably a one-off game. This is not a young Ryan Suter, but man, he looked pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. Aiden, you mentioned Matthew Barzell for a place we can head to next. He's been placed on LTIR. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks. And honestly, for this Islanders team, I know they've got some good players elsewhere on the roster, but with their star out, I don't really know how they're gonna do for the next couple months.
It New York, to me, this Islanders team, yeah, I don't know if there's another team like even this Edmonton Oilers team that I watched beat Calgary last night. I have them on right now. They're losing to New Jersey in the first period here, but like they rolled into Nashville and they had an amazing game in Nashville. They beat the Predators in the first game without McDavid. Uh, I I think the I again, you put it in our notes that this feels like a backbreaker. I kind of do think, James, that the Islanders would be more negatively affected by missing Barzell than almost any other team just missing one of their players with a full roster because that team lacks offensive spark and creativity, right? Like you have very offensively capable players, but Anders Lee, Bo Horvat, Brock Nelson, they're not these explosive players that are going to take over games, right? They're not somebody that I talked about like Valeri Nichushkin, where when they're on the ice, you have to be alert that they could get the puck and turn it into a goal in 3 seconds or less, right? And that's just the reality of the games that these guys play. It's a bunch of very good players, but Barzal has something for that team that just isn't in the rest of the roster. And that, yeah, like Islanders games and New York in general, like we've obviously kind of been seeing this group age, but I think this season will be the call to action of okay, it's time to seriously start investing in the future here because I don't know if the pieces are in place for success in the short term, and I think the Barzell injury is actually just gonna like accentuate that point.
I want to see their freshly drafted Cole Iserman play next year.
Could see him at the end of this year, right? That's far from a rarity that, again, teams used to be so like protective of the entry level years, but now teams almost will deliberately burn one if they can because then the second contract comes sooner. And if like Cole Iserman would make less money signing a contract after 2 full seasons than three. That's kind of the thinking, right? So I
Yep.
wouldn't be surprised if we saw him after his NCAA season's over, especially if the Islanders are close to a playoff spot. Quite seriously, right? Like he genuinely would bring something right now if you put him in the lineup tomorrow that not a lot of guys on that team have, and it's the offensive flair and creativity and the like. He gets the puck in the neutral zone. If you're not careful, it's going in the back of your net, right? Just like that.
Aiden, one thing I want to talk about on this week's episode is how awesome it is to see former players and coaches go play against their former teams for the first time. I was just talking about the Leafs Blues game. Craig Berube, first time playing against the Blues since he left the team that made him a head coach and a Stanley Cup champion. Super cool to see, super cool to talk about, even when it's not the first time. Watching Fleury go play probably his last game against the Penguins. So awesome. And getting the win against them too. Oh,
I was going to bring up the Minnesota Pittsburgh game. Yeah, you saw it Stamkos too, worth mentioning. Nashville went to
yep.
Tampa. Stamkos got a hero's reception that was very deserved. But the Fleury one was cool because even like Fleury's been in multiple places. I correct me if I'm wrong, he's been in the Stanley Cup final once, Eastern Conference or sorry, Western Conference final twice with a new team after Pittsburgh. Like
Yep.
he's won a Vezina trophy. It it does feel like it's been a long time since Fleury's been a Penguin, but you wouldn't have known it, right? When
Yeah.
with the entire crowd was cheering for him. It was really awesome, especially again as somebody who watched his career now, like almost start to finish. Like it's
Yep.
very cool to see this this end be very fitting in terms of the reception.
The other one worth mentioning was Jacob Markstrom playing a game against the Calgary Flames for the first time. That one was pretty cool. He's always a pretty candid guy in how he explains the emotions behind things. So I enjoyed that Marquee post game interview. That was a lot of fun to watch. So check that one out if you have a sec and you want to hear a guy kind of just explain how he feels, explain what it's like going back to a place that appreciated them and a place where he was able to call home for a while. Moving on though, I believe this is our last bit of NHL news to talk about. It's something we missed last episode. I ended up calling Aiden just after we recorded, going, "Oh God, we missed two massive extensions." I believe they're both 7-year deals. Alexis Lafreniere with the Rangers for just over 7 million per. And Shea Theodore with the Golden Knights re-ups at also seven something, I believe. The Theodore one, it is more money than it sounds like because there is no state tax in Nevada for athletes. And or at least it's a better tax situation. Sometimes I get lost on the no state tax thing. But uh man, Shea Theodore, great start to the season so far. I think a lock for Team Canada for the Four Nations and Olympics. Hell of a player. And I don't think this was a guy I saw getting to free agency. Didn't really think that was a possibility. I mean, even if you look at how loaded Vegas's blue line is now with Hannafin signed long term as well, I don't know. It didn't really seem like it could happen. I talked to some people who went, "Oh, this could be a huge guy for the next little chunk of free agency." No, 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 no. If you're Vegas, you're not letting that guy go anywhere. But I think there's more to talk about with Lap's extension in New York. I've seen some people call the steal. I've seen some people say overpay. Those people are in the minority. And then I see some people say not enough. Why didn't he go for more? Why isn't he betting on himself and signing this one after the season? Aiden, care to shed some light on the timing of this deal? Why you think he signed it now rather than taking it to the end of the year? And I don't know. There's people like myself who think he could be over a point per game this season.
James, honestly, I kind of look at what's happening in Vancouver, man. The Elias Pettersson contract was such a big deal. And the fact that he was like seconds away from being traded was such a big deal that the fan base, the organization, and the player, I think, I don't know if they've recovered from it, right? And I think in these situations, if you're 23-year-old Alexia Lafreniere, you just had a great start to the season. You had your best NHL season yet last season,
Great
and the team,
playoffs.
great playoffs. The team that's drafted you, the team that's put you on the first line, is coming to you offering you $50 million to play for this team for the next like 70% of a decade. Like, come on, man. I totally understand that we live in this really sad world where everybody's obsessed with maximizing everything and having the most grandeur things. But at the end of the day, like there are more important things in life. And I think that the player and the team are going to be happy this got done. This was good for everybody.
Well, and one other thing to consider when people go, "Oh, it's not enough money. It's not enough money. Why didn't you take more? Oh, it's such a steal. How did they get him that cheap?" Well, dude, he's freshly 23 years old as of just under a month ago. This is a 7-year deal, okay? He's going to be 31 when he negotiates his next contract. So, presumably still in his prime. At that point, with where the salary cap will probably be and with what caliber of player he will probably be, that's probably $100 million deal. So when he looks back and it's like, there's not going to be any going, oh no, I only made $155 million in my career. No, it's not going to be a worry at all. In fact, he's probably looking at this going, okay, I had a slow start to my career. This team gave me a lot of chances, played me a lot of different places where I could probably succeed. I love where I'm at. I get to play in New York City. I get to be a Ranger, taken to the ice at MSG. Come on. You're taking that deal and running with it. Let's get rid of the distraction. And if, oh, maybe I could hold out and get a little bit more, maybe that little more makes them lose Igor. Or maybe it makes them have to trade away more players that keep them in elite contender status so they can sign Igor. No, 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 no. He made the right decision. His
Yeah,
agent was probably going, dude, no, 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 don't do it. But he just said, no, man, let's turn the page. Let's get going. I have a point per game season to get done. So props to him, prop to the Rangers, props to the agent. I want to see this team roll. I want to
yeah.
see a Rangers Cup win.
For me, I'm generally not a fan of going down the like oh, every player should take less so their team can win, right? Like the Olaf Renier, maybe he took 7-4 instead of 8-5 because he wants Igor Shesterkin to stay. Because at the end of the day, we are all hockey fans, right? We all only enjoy this sport because of the players that play it. So if Alexis Lafreniere wanted $9 million a season and Igor Shesterkin wants 14, I don't think that should be a choice that the Rangers have to make. I think they both should get it. And then the New York Rangers should have to pay a luxury tax for their cap overages. That's a whole other conversation, but that's me kind
That's
of
a
generally
that's a
saying,
7 hour conversation that leads nowhere, sadly.
yeah, well, and my 2 cents is just that. Listen, at the end of the day, every player, at the end of the day, they are the employees, right?
Yep.
I want them to have the most benefits from their employment that they can because that's 95% of the world is employees. So you want the best conditions for everybody. So to me, like the I just wanted to say that because putting the onus on the players, saying, oh, even just the blame, like it wouldn't be Lafreniere's fault if they paid him 9.5 and then Igor walks in free agency, right? That's not how that goes. But I think this situation with the New York Rangers is kind of an interesting one to look at and ask yourself, who wouldn't benefit if the Rangers could keep everybody, right? Like who wouldn't benefit? And that's kind of the question that I think needs to be asked once we get into this next collective bargaining agreement, right? But that is a preamble to a long conversation that we might potentially all have in one episode eventually, or kind of intermittently as the next collective bargaining agreement gets negotiated.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Well, let's take it out of the NHL and let's talk, let's say, amateur hockey, because
Amateur hockey, yeah.
soon this might not be the junior hockey section of our podcast because the NCAA CHL vote is coming this week. Aiden, tell our listeners what's going on.
At the end of the day, this is at its heart, it's a very good thing. I don't often want to like celebrate things that should have been happening all along, right? Like because you're glorifying something that is just the way it should be, not like this big progressive step forward. But at the end of the day, this is huge for hockey in Canada, hockey in North America. So again, we've talked about this on this podcast a lot. We had Derek Bedard as a guest to kind of chat about the ramifications specifically for Western Canadian junior teams and kids. But Thursday, November 7th, there's a vote in the NCAA that will potentially change the rule that currently bars players who have previously played in any of the CHL leagues. That's the WHL, Ontario Hockey League, QMJHL. Um, they currently lose their NCAA eligibility because the very minimal, modest compensation they get for playing in those leagues is enough for the NCAA to consider them to be professionals. Now, again, these kids are generally teenagers, right? You have the odd 20-year-old, but again, these are just all kids playing junior hockey. Previous, the decision would have been made by this kid at the age of 15 or 16 to choose a league that wouldn't have lost him his eligibility, but those leagues generally don't have the organizations, the competition that's as that is at the same level as the CHL team. So what this change is going to do really is it just opens doors that shouldn't have been closed in the first place. So again, if you are a CHL player, you get recruited by your hometown. Let's say you're from here, you get recruited by the Red Deer Rebels. You spend a couple years with the Rebels, it doesn't work out, and then you go end up playing in the AJHL here. Well, now the best you can do isn't Canadian U Sports, right? You don't have this. You're not handcuffed to one option because you played a season, or literally, James, it was even played a game in the CHL and you were done, right? The other thing that I think this is going to do in Canada specifically, it's further it further strengthens Canadian hockey as one collective whole because this way there's not different avenues. There's just, hey, do you want to be successful playing hockey in Canada? Well, get into the this system, the BCEHL, that funnels you up to the Western Hockey League, and then from the Western Hockey League, you can go anywhere. You can go to play in American universities. You can go play professional, either low level North America or over in Europe if you're not drafted in the NHL, right? Like it's restrictions that have always been silly that they're there in the first place, right? So really, at the end of the day, this is just lifting a ban that was kind of a hindrance to many Canadians, and now here we are. And as of November 7th, the expectation is that the NCAA will vote to allow many more players to be eligible. Um, latest, again, we've seen so many of these, but an Ottawa Senators prospect, Blake Montgomery, just left the Lincoln Stars of the USHL, which is where friend of the podcast, Lane Loomer, is still playing right now, the Penn
Nice.
State commit. Montgomery committed to Wisconsin University. He just joined the London Knights of the Ontario Hockey League. So again, uh, in terms of Canada specifically, the CHL teams have already started to benefit from this because you're seeing top talent playing in Junior A go there. Um, yeah, again, I haven't been shy to say that for Canadians and Canadian kids, this is good news.
All right, Aiden, I think that does it for the news portion of our podcast. It's time for some games because it ain't the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast without a couple great games to play. And I plan on living by that more again. I think we gotta up our trivia, up our games, because as much as you guys want to have fun with it, we want to have fun with it too. And this is how this all started for us, was playing NHL player Hangman on the board in BCIT room SE10, or building SE10 rather, in the radio room, procrastinating getting our important, very soon to be due projects done. Instead, just being nerds. Aiden, this game comes from my roommate Kyle and I, who we work together. We work in civil construction, and sometimes as we're shoveling stuff and building stuff, we're chatting and we play Would You Rather. It's usually just some dumb little thing, but I'm going to call this or that. So I am going to give you two players in specific seasons of their careers. I want you to tell me which one of them you want for one game and why. So, player number one, I'm going to give you 2011 2012 Claude Giroux, who at multiple points during the season was leading the league in points. He finished with 93 points in 77 games. He put up 17 points in 10 playoff games, and they were upset by the New Jersey Devils in the second round. Giroux wasn't far off from leading the league in points. I believe that was an Evgeny Malkin year. Giroux was nominated for an award or two, if memory serves, but at one point during that season, my friends and I were talking and going, this is the most dominant player in the NHL. So you have one game. You either get him or this is a fun one. I'm giving you prime Marian Gaborik in his first season with the New York Rangers, where he scored 42 goals and 42 goals and 44 assists. So he put up 86 points in 76 games. At his peak, his speed, explosiveness, first few steps was unparalleled, and he was a lethal sniper at a time where you didn't really see guys scoring 50 goals as much. So that 44, pretty damn nice. Pretty damn nice. Or what did I say? 44. I meant to say
42.
yeah, that's right. He scored 42 goals one other time in his career. He was a Stanley Cup champion with the LA Kings in 2014, as he kind of became a gun for hire in his later years. But I mean, I remember watching this guy as a kid, and when I didn't know that much about hockey, he was a guy who stood out. And whereas Giroux, better hands, more of a leadership guy, Gabrick could make a play come from nothing. He could make something appear as if from nowhere. Tell me who you're taking and why to win one game.
I'm specifically taking round one Claude Giroux 2012.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
fair.
yeah.
It
It's
may be one
funny.
of the most entertaining series of our lifetimes.
Yes, yes, and that's kind of where I'm drawing from. And it's funny, you did pull two seasons that I am very familiar with. Like again, my hockey started 2010 Olympics. I loved that Slovakia team in the 2010 Olympics, so that was my introduction to all those guys. Like I knew Dimitra from the Canucks, but that was me getting to know especially Marian Hossa and Marian Gaborik specifically. I knew Hossa because he'd been in the Stanley Cup final, right? I knew the name. Um, so after that, I watched Gaborik pretty closely, and I was always like, he's one of the best wingers in the league. And my dad would always tell me that I'm wrong and silly. But I was always super, super high on him. But there was something about Giroux in those playoffs, man. He was a man possessed. He was almost like, and again, this just tells you where I was at the time because two of my favorite players I'm just going to throw out here. It genuinely looked like in those playoffs he was the perfect combination of Sidney Crosby and Jonathan Toews. That is the best way I can describe it. It was this unbelievable combination of tenacity and skill and smarts and it was just pouring out of him. And that series specifically in the first round, it was Pittsburgh. Yeah, yeah, it was Pittsburgh because it
Yep.
was that ridiculously high scoring one because Philly couldn't get a save for the entire decade of the 2010s. But Giroux and Voracek, especially in that series, were just so much fun to watch. So it's just that absolute monster of Claude Giroux is the one I'm gonna pick.
Was it close?
Yeah, because Gabrick, yeah, like you said, he had the ability kind of in that Rangers jersey to pull the puck out of anywhere and get a scoring chance off. And again, I love complete wingers who score, right? Like full offensive toolkit, smart on the puck, smart distributor. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's funny that you mentioned Marian Hossa because he is one of the two players I have in round two. So there's
Okay.
a lot of seasons that I could pull from in Marian Hossa's career. Very many. You're probably expecting that I go with Blackhawks here.
Again,
Instead, I
keep in mind age here because if it's not a Blackhawks year, I'm gonna have some hard times pulling it out.
I'm actually going 1 year prior with the Detroit Red Wings, where it was the second of 3 straight years in Stanley Cup finals with different teams. And this was probably the tail end of the era where Detroit would just recruit every star player gun for hire. And Hossa was a man on a mission. He put up 40 goals and 30 assists for 71 points in 74 games, added in 15 points in 23 playoff games. And this was where you saw him turn from the straight offensive dynamo to adding those other facets to his game. He really, really worked with guys like Zetterberg, with Datsuk, with Holmstrom in this Red Wings attack that really made you have to work your bag off at any end of the ice. Any square foot of room on the ice was contested, and this was where he changed his game. Because I don't know if our listeners know this very much, but um, Hossa broke in with the Senators, and then he was very, very good. But he was traded to the Thrashers, where he put up 92 points in 80 games, 100 points in 82 games, 56 points in 60 games, and I mean, it was one of those scenarios where it's a ridiculous elite player on a team that can't really get anything done. They just didn't have the depth to do it. Player number two, though, another former Thrasher,
Oh,
one of my favorite players of all time, Ilya Kovalchuk. Some might say the Thrasher. I'm not going for a Thrashers season. Where we're headed is the 2011-12 season, same as the Giroux one we talked about, where Kovalchuk put up 83 points in 77 games. 37 of those points were goals, 19 points in 23 playoff games. And his offense, again, wasn't the whole story. This is an Ilya Kovalchuk who was, I believe, fourth or fifth in Selke voting. And I believe he followed that up in the lockout shortened season as being sixth in Selke voting. While he was one of the most dangerous players on the puck in the NHL for a decade, he managed to add that to his game when it mattered most. After all of those years of futility in Atlanta, where he was putting up absolute insane numbers, stupid numbers. Before people worried about Ovechkin at the left point on the power play, people worried about Kovalchuk. And this was an era in the early 2000s when he broke in where you didn't have a forward on the point on the power play much. Most teams still ran 2D. I know it sounds stupid, but that's just the way it used to be. Kovalchuk was one of the first that was a mainstay back there. And in that wrist shot from just about the top of the circles, so dangerous. Kovalchuk going in on a breakaway, dangerous. Going into the boards, he's going to poke it away while hitting you, and he's going to weave his way through your defenseman and score. Much like the Marian Hossa we just talked about would. Who are you taking one game to win it all?
That's harder. I remember that Kovalchuk season so much better, and I think that's part of the reason I'm leaning that way. Because I don't really remember too much from the Detroit season. I remember watching them in the playoffs for sure, but I would be shocked if you told me that I watched more than one Detroit regular season game that year. But by 2011, 2012, I was watching more of it to have at least watched Kovalchuk again for the entirety of those playoffs and at least the games he would have played Vancouver that year. So like that version of Kovalchuk, I remember being very much a fan of in kind of the way you said it, where it wasn't this guy that I had known him to be in Atlanta, where he's this 60 goal scorer potentially. I know he never hit 60 in Atlanta, but this ridiculously offensively talented forward who, like was compared to Ovechkin, for instance, right? And I didn't see an Ovechkin, but I saw somebody who I couldn't help but watch that year and say, I want the Canucks to have him on this team, right? Like every team needs this guy. Like every team needs this guy with their hands on the steering wheel. That was kind of how I saw Kovalchuk playing that year. Now again, I'm gonna say Kovalchuk. The other thing that definitely stings was the fact that we didn't get much more of it, right? That kind of maybe adds to the nostalgia, the fact that this version of Kovalchuk was legitimately very fleeting. But yeah, two very good options again, though.
All right, so you went Kovalchuk, third and final round. This one being second line centers. I am going with a 2015-16 playoff, oh sorry, 2014-15 Ryan Kesler. His first year in a Ducks uniform, where regular season didn't quite put up his numbers that he put up with the Canucks, but in the playoffs, I don't know if you remember that series with the Ducks against the Hawks. That is probably one of my favorite playoff series of all time.
Peak.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. It was such good hockey to watch. And then number two, 2011, 2012, year I keep going with, probably because it's one of my favorite hockey watching years ever. Mike Richards with the LA Kings. So, Richards that season puts up 44 points in 74 games. Similar season to the Kessler year I'm talking about, where I believe he had 47, but 15 points in 20 playoff games, both playing a similar style of game. Who are you taking to win it all?
This is so hard, dude, because you've pulled out these two very good players as like third best seasons, right? And that's kind of what's making this difficult. If you had said 2009-10 Mike Richards against
Oh,
this Ryan
yeah.
Kessler, it's Mike Richards. If you'd said 2010-11 Ryan Kessler against this Mike Richards, it's Ryan Kessler. But you've pulled these years out, and I obviously kudos to you because that would have been intentional.
Mhm.
I'm taking Ryan Kessler. It pains me because I
It's so
even
close.
yeah, it is close, and I always liked Mike Richards a lot. Um, but Kessler was the best player in his own zone so often.
Yeah.
So Mike Richards to me was definitely that in Philly. I don't know if he ever was that in LA, right? Because
First two seasons in LA.
yeah, he didn't have to be, right? And that was part of it. LA, that forward core was deep. You had Kopitar, you had Carter, you had Brown. Like it he didn't rely on him the same way Anaheim relied on Kessler because after that Getzlaf Perry line, like Kessler's winger, and it was a version of Matt Beleskey that was very good, but that I know for a fact that was one of his second line wingers, right? And like, and no disrespect to that Matt Beleskey because he was a beast, but that's that's worth considering. So again, I it's close. I very much like the pull. That Kessler, I think, has it for me though.
That Matt Bolesky you're talking about put up 8 goals in 16 playoff games that year.
That one of them was in overtime in that series. I'm pretty sure Kessler had the primary assist on that goal too. That's the one I'm thinking
Off a
of those two
takeaway.
guys. It was a rebound, right? Kessler went far pad on Crawford, and Crawford kicked out the world's biggest rebound because he wasn't actually that good of a goalie. That's my secret about the mid 2010s for all the new hockey fans. That Chicago actually didn't have any good goaltenders for their cups.
All right, so that was all I've got for trivia for now. Expect me to reinvent the wheel with trivia pretty much from here on out. Like I said, we want to keep having fun with it, and I think you guys have had enough career trajectories and enough finish that trade. It's something that's got to change a little bit. But now we're done with hockey completely, I would say. Time for movies.
Okay,
Aiden, have you watched anything this week?
right before we go to movies, this is the podcast that I think we want, where we can like have hockey be more concise and then have the and James, I like it not being trivia because there is that like somewhat strenuous
Yeah.
trivia process and I definitely didn't feel the same pressure to perform in these conversations that we've had so far.
And it's
So
less editing too, right?
yes, it is. That is also a piece of this, and James, yeah, you nailed it on the head. So far, this podcast is going to be not super difficult to edit. We're on it so far. But movies, did I watch movies, dude? Again, it's been so much freaking hockey for me. It's gonna be less hockey and more movies and more TV shows. Like as I think I get closer to Christmas, because I'm gonna get more homesick and just like want the comforting feeling that familiar TV shows or movies bring. For now, I've just watched like again, you said you watched one hockey game this week. I think I've missed one hockey game this weekend. Like it's been so much. Um, so that's kind of just been that's where I've been at. But I'm happy to hear about what movie you watched this week.
All right. Well, before I go into the movie I watched this week, I am going to keep nagging you to watch Succession. I am on my rewatch, and I am almost done the first season of this. My roommate and I have been watching it episode by episode, and on the second watch through, I think it's even better than the first watch through. And the first was already probably my best watching experience ever. So, I mean, do it. Watch an episode this week. I'm charging you with it, and then you're gonna let the fans know what you think if I've set the bar too high. But movie I watched. I went to the movie theaters yesterday. I watched We Live in Time with Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh.
Okay.
And I was on a date. So like that already kind of like changes the watching experience from like, well, it should change the watching experience from me sitting on my couch at home alone. But Aiden, I was so immersed in the chemistry and relationship between these two people on screen that I at times forgot I was even on a date. I am a sappy, soft person, and I think this is the best on-screen relationship couple I've ever seen. There are some very sad
Ooh.
moments,
That
and
screams recency bias. That's that
okay, that
like
screams recency bias, but you're talking to a guy who watches 2 rom-coms a week.
yeah. No. Like it's just you said that and my immediate reaction was like I'm gonna look back on like I remember right after the World Cup of hockey ended, again, I've been such an international hockey nerd for so long. I remember it finishing and I was like, that was the greatest thing ever. I loved that. And then 4 months later, I was like, that sucked. But it took me a while to get there. So that's the alarm bell that went off in my head because there's there's a lot of movies that we have to put to the back burner to call it the best. However, I'm very open to hearing you out because I have heard good things.
Okay, so in terms of genre, it's classified as a romantic comedy. I would call it a dramedy with comedic aspects, or sorry, a romantic drama with comedic aspects. And that works so well considering the lead actor and actress. It is so perfect. Like Florence Pugh is so emotional and spunky and like intelligent and multifaceted and like grabs the wheel at times and like just completely steals a scene. And then Andrew Garfield is so good at conveying um different things going on within a character's head through very subtle expressions and how he reacts to things or doesn't react to things. I mean, I've known a lot of people in very, very lengthy relationships that have had their ups and downs, and it was like nothing I had ever seen, but it wasn't at any point unrealistic. And no point of it was like, oh, this would only happen in a movie. I mean, other than maybe like one really big part, which is very early on in the movie, and I'm not going to spoil it, but that part wasn't super realistic. But man, I was at points laughing. I had a couple tears come out at times. I was so drawn in and welcomed by these characters into their lives as they go through one of the more difficult things. The whole premise of the movie is that she has cancer and it is something that affects how they get to live life. And there are a lot of time jumps in the movie, so I recommend kind of watching it when you're focused. There are also some fairly intimate scenes, so maybe mind who you watch it with. This is not a movie to watch with your mom or dad. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know what our listeners' relationships are like with their parents, but I'm not watching this movie with my mom. I'm sorry. Um, um, the thing I will add on that matter is, I read something online before I watched the movie when I first heard about it. Apparently, during the intimate scene, they basically just said, this is what we want to get from it, and they let the two of them just run with it. And it's pretty steamy. But dude, like even the child actors in this movie were phenomenal. The supporting characters had such small roles, but they were able to add things to it without taking away from what the main characters were doing. And like at all points, it was like these are real things someone can and will go through and does go through. I believe it was adapted from a book. I'm not 100% sure, but if it's an original screenplay, kudos, because oh my God. I have raved about some of the great movies I've seen this year. I think 2024 has been a very good year for movies on the low key end. Like I loved Love Lies Bleeding was phenomenal. I enjoyed The Ministry for Ungentlemanly Warfare. I thought Challengers was great with a Trent Reznor score. And the performances in that movie were incredible. This is right up at the top. To me, this is one of the top few movies of the year without a doubt. I see no reason to think otherwise, and I very, very much encourage people to watch it. You know, if you want to watch with your girlfriend, significant other, do it. This is the movie. I thought theaters were a great spot to watch it, but watching it at home on your couch, no problem. Give it a go. Honestly, you know how I rate things really hard. I'm giving it like an 8.6.
Wow.
And it only got 73% on Rotten Tomatoes.
So we're talking like this is this is in the top 15, 20 all-time range if you're giving this an 8.6, if I understand your
This is like top 50.
okay, okay. I've known you to be very harsh on that 1 through 10. Like
Oh yeah,
yeah,
totally.
like I'm not
Because
super
because
lenient.
on my scale, a 10 is an unimaginable thing that we strive for.
Yeah,
A
that's
zero
fair.
is so bad that if you watch it, you die. Like I don't know. I don't think I've seen a zero because I'm still kicking. You're listening to me talk and ramble here right now. So give it a go. I don't remember the last time I saw a movie in theaters that I was this impressed by. A lot of my theater experiences end up not being as good as this. I usually end up watching the A-list blockbusters at home. Well, not the A-list blockbusters at home, but like the better character studies because I would call this like a romantic character study.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say. Like just hearing your descriptions of it, it's just further proof that at the end of the day, compelling characters portrayed properly, you should be able to give them any situation, and the movie should be watchable, right? So, at the that's that's the that's the right structure, that's the right foundation to build the house on, and you're that's what's screaming at me about your review is that I'm gonna watch this movie and I should pay attention to how these characters are written and like that, you know, we're always like finding what our new standards are, right? Like I have if you ask me what my favorite movie is in a particular genre or in a particular just level of seriousness, right? I'm gonna value different things and I think that good character writing is so underrated, right? Like it's huge. So yeah, I'll give it a go.
One other thing I would love to add about that movie, um, Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield playing English characters, like British characters in the movie, both have natural English accents. And while I see a lot of people do great accents in their acting, yes, Andrew Garfield's born in the States, but his mom's British and actually has that accent already. But yeah, I really thought it was nice to hear that.
Florence Pugh, man, like I'm starting to think we're treading into like might be the best female actress in Hollywood right now. Like we're
Dude,
getting
I
there.
I will completely agree with you there.
Yeah, we're getting there now. Like I thought forever was Frances McDermott. I was always a big Frances McDermott fan, but the last four movies I've watched with Florence Pugh, aside from Oppenheimer, she's been the best part of three of them. And the only reason she wasn't was how good Oppenheimer was as a whole. She definitely was like one of the best parts of it in even the very scarce role she had.
Did you watch Don't Worry, Darling with her and Harry Styles?
Yes, I did not
Yeah.
like the movie at all, but she was so good.
So good.
I didn't like it. It
It's
it
meant to make you incredibly uncomfortable. That's the point.
yeah, but even just like there was a certain level of like sensibility that I felt it was lacking, right? Like but she made it watchable by a
And I'm
lot.
not a horror movie guy, but Midsummer.
Yeah, exactly. She's phenomenal in that. That's another movie literally designed to make you feel things and uncomfortable things, and she portrays all those things in such a believable but severe way, right? Like it's
Oh, and last week's movie that I talked about, The Boy and the Heron, she is one of the female leads for voice actresses. Bang, there you go. I mean, and it's crazy that she's able to do all of this while still being like a Marvel and like Dune blockbuster kind of person. Like definitely a multifaceted talent. I wholeheartedly agree with you that she's near the top there. Do we have any questions this week?
no, I forgot to do the questions this week. Dude, I'm working 10 games here this week. I'm at a
Okay, I
tournament in
know I'm beating
Calgary.
a dead horse here, but again, listeners, love all you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much. I know there's not a ton of you, but we keep doing this regardless. I really, really encourage you to send in a voice note on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
Please do that. Send it to the Great Canadian Hockey Pod, send it to my account, send it to Aiden's account. We'd love to throw it on the pod, answer a question, or just have a comment from you guys on there. And again, I will pre-listen. Not just gonna play it dry here. because I have some sick puppies for friends. And I know how this could end up. But I think that's all for us today for this week. I thank all of you guys for listening as always. And without further ado, let's roll that outro. Thanks, guys.